Welcome back to my studio. Today we're looking at something a little bit different. Now, this is a film lens review with a digital camera. It's a bit, bear with me, it will make sense. I have recently been borrowed, I will give it back, Drew, the 110mm Mamiya Sekor lens. Now, I wanted one of these, I really wanted one of these, but they're really expensive. They're between £1,000 and £1,500. Which in the grand scheme of lenses is not ludicrous, but it's enough to not want to blindly buy it. And there's very little information out there. Now this is from Mamiya RZ. It doesn't work backwards on the RB, I don't think, unless you hold the aperture in place. There's no electronics there. But this is their all singing, all dancing masterpiece of a lens. Now, one of the reasons why it's so sought after for the Mamiya is because it's a 2.8 lens. Now, I've got other Mamiya lenses. This one here is the 50. This is a 3.5. No, it's not. It's a 90. It's a 3.5. And this one here is the 50, which I absolutely love. And this is a 4.5. So 2.8 on a medium format camera is actually quite a big deal. It lets in a lot of light. And when you're using something that big and that cumbersome, you need a decent shutter speed to not get camera shake if you're going handheld. But that's not how I use it. I use it on this system here, which is my Camber Actus, and I have the Mamiya lenses on the front and a digital camera on the back, and it gives me it gives me some. It gives me a very modest amount of the movements of a large format camera, but it's great for my commercial work. And now I have this to play with. And there's a few things I want to test here. One is it better than the 90? Now, this is with the context of what I do for a job, because I'm going to swing this round, because that black line going through the back of my head is driving me insane. That's better. See, now it's not going through my head. We're good. The 90 and 110, very close in focal length, very different in apertures, but the aperture doesn't bother me. I don't care about 2.8. I'm going to be at f10 most of the time anyway, which is where we're going to test these lenses. But I'm also curious, is it as good as a modern 100mm lens? This is the macro planar, which is about as good as you can get for a Canon camera. So we're going to be testing these three lenses at f10, because that's what I do. I'm not going to shoot them wide open because that has no relevance to me. I can tell you, oh yeah, the bokeh is beautiful. I hate bokeh. Like, I'm not going to give you any good information there. But I want to test these three lenses. We're going to choose a subject. We're going to light it with flash. It's not going to be a pretty picture. We're going to go onto the computer and I'm going to talk about these. Now, straight off the bat, the 100mm lens is bizarrely small and light compared to the 90 and 50. And I think that's worth noting. It's also lighter than this one here. Build-wise, it's exactly the same. It's got the green Z on it, which all of these have. It looks the same, feels the same, has the same ergonomics, same aperture blades, all that good stuff. It's exactly the same. I can fit these bellows onto the front of it for a lens hood. They just come off and swap around. It's exactly what you'd expect. It is considerably lighter and smaller though than I would have thought. Now, with the Mamiya lenses, the two I've already got, the 90 and the 50 is brilliant. It is so sharp, so detailed. I'd hazard a guess it'd work on an 80 megapixel back, maybe 100, probably not, but I only shoot on 50 megapixels. Now, this is more resolution than the film would be. So whatever it shows here, it's not you can't take this review directly from here to film. It's not quite like that, but it should give you a good understanding, and we can do a little bit of pixel peeping, which I know some people love. You get to see what I think about it as a professional photographer. So let's get the shots and let's see what we can do with this lens. So what we're going to photograph, I've got a stool, I've got a yellow smooth kind of watering can, and I'm going to put a plant on top of it. Nothing fancy, like I said, just a thing, That's all we need. There we go, here's a plant. We've got some chrome, we've got some texture, we've got a bit of everything going on in this shot. Let me move my trolley out your way. There we go, beautiful. We're going to frame it as close as possible to one another. We're not going to try and get it exactly the same, but we'll get a reasonable likeness, I guess. We'll compose the 90 a little bit too wide and then sort of work backwards from there. So I'm currently just tethered into Capture One over there. Let's just pull this camera down to a height where we can actually see what we're shooting. There we go. Now what's really important is that we get it in focus, because without that, we're going to have some problems. So, f11 sounds like a good starting place. And I'm going to focus each shot on the rim of the pot as best I can. And then we're just going to open up the shutter speed to a little bit more lighting, I guess. So let's just try 5th. Just a little bit more light than that, couldn't we? Perfect, there we go. So we'll call this one here 90mm. Okay, now we're going to put on the 100mm, which is exciting. Let's try and get it as similar as possible. I'm never going to get these right, but we'll get them as close as we can. There we go, it's not too bad. So this one here is the 110. And then the last thing we're going to do is use the 100mm prime on the Canon body. So let's do that next. Perfect. So let's fire that shot. And this one here, there we go. And 3. There we go, there's our 3 shots. I can see a difference already, which is interesting. But what we're going to do now, I'm going to take these through into the editing suite. I'm going to put them onto an actual calibrated monitor, and we're going to talk about these images. We're going to see, and obviously this is only one factor within lenses. We're just looking at detail, sharpness, contrast, nothing else. That's all we're looking at here. But interesting nonetheless. Let's go and have a look at it. Okay, so here's our winnings. We can capture one here. I tried to get as close as possible. They're obviously not. I think it's interesting, and this is just by chance, that it's been punctuated by the digital lens being in the middle. And just looking at it from this point, you can see how much better a digital lens copes with the highlights and bringing them in. And also how much more contrast is on there. Now, people talk about contrast on lenses being a good thing. I'm not sure if it's good or not. It's a thing. And these can be manipulated, which we'll look at. Now, if I just focus in or zoom into where I focused, I would say, let me put my readers on just to be really sure, that the Zeiss is the least sharp. It's the most contrasty, and it's captured the highlight details the best. And I know you're looking at a screen recording, so it's probably not as easy to tell. I can't tell the difference between the 90 and the 100 in terms of details. This is the 110, the fancy one, and this is the 90. I'd be hard pushed to tell you the difference here. I mean, this is beyond resolution we're zoomed in at now. I don't know if I can tell the difference. Maybe the 110 has the edge. It's definitely not £1,000 more edge. I mean, obviously it looks bigger here because it is more compressed. So hard to say. See here on the 90 we're getting a little bit of artifact around here, and it is not as bad on the 110, but that is a click of a mouse in Capture One to fix, so maybe not worth £1,000. Don't know is the answer. I guess the big question is, do I need it? And the answer is a resounding no. It is not different enough to the 90 on a digital body at a stop down aperture to be worth, maybe it is. I don't know, what do you think? Let me know what you think. I don't think, I keep thinking certain bits look better and then vice versa, and it's like, I think we're getting nicer leaves here on the 90 than on the 100. Or 110, I keep calling it 100 as 110. It's really hard to tell. I don't think there's any real noticeable difference. I think the 110 is sharper, but not enough. It captures more detail, but again, not enough to be worth the price tag. And if we look at them at full size, I don't believe there is any true difference apart from focal length. And yes, it is a much more compressed image, as you can tell. But I don't think I need both. I think the 90 is enough, especially when I own this 100 as well. Now, this is interesting because it comes out more contrasting. But if we just open up this contrast a bit, and then just compare that to the 90, which is now, see what I mean? So I've removed the contrast, and now the 90 is more contrasty. So like, it's not lost any image quality in doing that. Now, if you're shooting slide film, obviously that's a major issue, or a major bonus. Maybe you want that extra contrast. Now, once I've removed that contrast, how are we looking at detail compared to the 90? which one gives us the most detail. Because my work, and this isn't true for everyone's work, but my work, like my professional work, which is what I use these lenses for, is all about detail. And I think the 100mm captures the highlights better, and I think the 90mm captures more detail. And obviously I have the benefit of using these Mamiya lenses on a bellows camera, which is really nice and really useful to use. Look at the difference in colours. It's huge, isn't it? Like, there's the difference in rendering of colours. What I need to do is find places that are definitely in focus, because then I can really go, look, here's that bit. That looks very similar focus plane there. This has got more in, hasn't it? It's a problem, like focusing on a lens like this, even at f10, it's very hard to get any real. This must be the most. There we go. Let's turn the focus mask off. Yeah, the 90's got the edge, I think. See, here it looks more detailed than here, but then here it's more detailed than here. I think the 90's got the edge. Which for a lens that costs, what, £300? Which is competing with a £1,600 brand new lens, and this lens is from the 70s. It's interesting, you know, and I mean, obviously you have to have the bellows system to be able to use this in a digital camera, unless you're using a Mamiya, and at which point I don't know whether you'd worry about these things if you were shooting on film. I don't think, you know, it's enough of a difference. I'd say the 110 is the best lens, but very, very closely followed by the 90. And if you don't need that 2.8, the 90 will do the job. And then finally, the Zeiss, which does a completely different job, which is why I have it. It is not doing the same job as the 90. It creates a very different image. And we use the 100 Zeiss a lot for flat lays, actually. Especially with high contrast scenes where we need to keep highlights in check. We can pull the shadows back, as you've seen here. Whereas the 90, it just has a little bit more pin cushioning when you're doing like a perfectly laid out flat lay. And also the highlight retention is not as good. And it's to do with the coatings on the lenses. They coat the glass. And back in the 70s, they used very different technology to today. Like even with the Zeiss, this is the new version of the old Zeiss. The lens itself is identical, but the coating they've put on the glass is what's different. And that's what helps with the highlight retention. So something they've really failed with their marketing and explaining to people. But there we go. That's what we've won. There's all three images together. And now that I've adjusted the contrast, you can see this one's brighter. Let me just jump into here quickly and just see if I can just... There we go. I've tried to match the contrast a little bit. Obviously, I could do a better job. That's just opening the shadows up a bit. But there we are. That's what we've got. 90mm, 100 Zeiss, 110 Mamiya. I think the 90 is the best bang for buck lens. And then I'd probably choose, if I was using digital, the Zeiss, and then the 110. If I was shooting film and in available light, the 110 would definitely be the one I'd go for first, because that 2.8 compared to a 4.5 is a huge amount of light. It's like a different film stock almost being put in. But there we go. Hope you enjoyed this. Bit off piece, a bit different to usual. I'm sure we've got some film photographers watching this one, and if you want to see some film stuff, I do shoot film for all my personal work, so I am going to be making some videos on that. Anyway, I'll see you soon. Bye bye.